This question came to me today and I felt a need to address it. It is on a scale of 0 to 100, how confident are you that the Christian God is real? And he posed it this way: 0 means it may be true, it may not be true, and you really have no clue whatsoever which case it is. And the higher percentage you go, the more you're inclined to think it's true, and 100% means you are absolutely certain this is true, that there is no way you can be mistaken about it. So here's my answer to that, and then I'll explain. I am 100% true that the Christian God is real, and there is no doubt in my mind, and there's no way I can be mistaken about it. So let me explain how I feel that way and what I mean by that, and then we can talk about it. Certainly, we have to have some assumptions, what we call presuppositions, before we can even have a conversation. And my presuppositions would include that the external world is real, that it's not an illusion, we're not in somebody's computer program, that this is real, and that the human mind is capable of discerning truth, that there is such a thing as truth, and that the human mind is able to figure that out. We are competent to discern reality. If we can't agree that truth is possible or that truth even exists, there's no sense talking about confidence about the existence of God, because we have to first establish that yes, there is such a thing as truth, and yes, it can be known, and yes, it can be known to us. And I believe all of those things. And so let me talk about, I have 4 factors as to why I consider that I am 100% absolutely certain that the Christian God exists and that I cannot be mistaken about it. First of all is logic. Pure out logic convinces me that God exists. You're probably aware of the logical proofs for the existence of God. They are things like causality. Where did this universe come from? Where did we come from? How did this all happen? When we talk about causality and we talk about purpose, which is a word, a philosophical or teleology, if we talk about morality, if we talk about consciousness and personality, these are arguments, if when weighed, show a far greater strength towards theism than towards naturalism or towards atheism. Even though the arguments in and of themselves are not watertight or foolproof, first of all, they are far more solid and substantial than anything that an atheist or a scientific naturalist could ever give in opposition. And because they are so substantial in opposition, first of all, and second of all, because they make so much sense, they hold a lot of water, they carry a lot of weight. If we are arguing or inferring the most reasonable conclusion, we will arrive at theism. In my consideration, we will arrive at theism every time. I am 100% certain that theism is true and that there's no way I can be mistaken about it. I have evaluated the arguments, and the evidences for God when we're talking about logic and reason are extremely strong. The arguments against are non-existent to weak at best. And if we're trying to determine that God is real, if we're going logically speaking, we will go with theism every time. But the logical arguments by themselves do not bring me to 100%. So let's go to the second factor as to why I'm at 100%. And that is the scientific or the natural evidences. The heavens declare the glory of God. And I am convinced, based on what I see in science, that the causal mechanism or the causal mechanism is a person. That the causal mechanism is personal, eternal, moral, and powerful. And all of the evidences point to an intelligent, purposeful, powerful, eternal source. And that leads me to God. When we have to figure out, for instance, where did informational data come from? Where did DNA come from? Scientists will tell us that informational data comes from other informational data. And when we ask science to explain to us how did it arise, science has yet to be able to explain that. They talk about amino acids and proteins, they talk about RNA, but they're really not able to explain how informational data came about. There is no, to date, plausible scientific explanation as to how intelligence arose, but there is a plausible and sufficient theological explanation. There is not a plausible scientific explanation for the existence of consciousness, but there is a theistic explanation for the existence of consciousness. There is not a plausible scientific explanation for how is it that our universe is so finely tuned to life. There are about 60 cosmological constants that show that the universe is a very balanced and fine-tuned instrument supporting life, and if any of these cosmological constants were outside of the parameters that they are, that there would be no life. And when we weigh, what makes more sense? That this came from an intelligent being who was purposeful and powerful, or that this was time plus matter plus chance? The argument every time goes to a theistic one. Science fails at the principle of sufficiency of explanation, while theism shines there. It just shines. The natural world is more supportive of theism than it is of a naturalistic explanation. When you put this together with the logical arguments, I'm still not quite at 100%, but this is a very strong argument for God, and the arguments against God are just about non-existent. The third factor that pulls me in is my own experience. I believe that God exists completely separate from arguments, and that God can be known completely separate from arguments. I believe in the external world. Obviously, things make sense to us. We believe that other minds exist, even though we can't be sure of that, but we have reasons to believe in that we experience these things. We use logic and abstract reasoning, intuitions and perceptions to arrive at reasonable conclusions. Now, some people say your experiences don't count for anything, and I disagree with that. If I can't rely on my experiences, then we cannot trust any journalist, we cannot trust any historian, we cannot trust any scientist, we cannot trust anybody who says, guess what I saw, or guess what I heard, or you wouldn't believe what I experienced today. In other words, we wouldn't believe anything. There'd be no such thing as truth, science, history, logic, anything, if some experiences are not trustworthy. You and I both know that some experiences are trustworthy, that not all experiences are false, or that not all experiences are illusions. And so experience counts. When you put together logic, plus the evidence of science in our world, plus the experiences that I've had, I've come up to 100% already. I am absolutely certain that God exists. I can reason about Him. I can see the evidences of Him, and I have experienced God. But if we add to that a fourth factor, and that fourth factor is the Bible. The Bible is a powerful book of truth and wisdom. I know that people discredit the Bible, saying it's just a bunch of fictional tales that are mythological, they're made up, you can't know or count on any of them. I have found the Bible in my study of it to be completely different from that conclusion. The Bible makes sense of life experiences. It makes sense of human experience. Its prophecies are astounding. Its teachings are life-changing. When I investigate the evidence, the historical evidences, the experiential evidences of the Bible, it's conforming to reality. I am absolutely convinced, based on all my study, that the Bible is true, and it's a forceful and stalwart source of truth. Now, if I take all these four together, logic, evidence, experience, and the Bible, I come to the place where I am absolutely 100% convinced that the Bible is true, and that not that the Bible is true, that God is real, that God exists. Well, it also includes that the Bible is true, and that I am not mistaken about this. I am 100% that the Bible is true, that Jesus is God, that God exists, that Christianity is the narrative of truth, and that the only way to salvation is through Jesus Christ. There is no doubt in my mind. Now let's talk about it.